Hello, welcome to Six Tackles with Gus, heading into round 6 of season 2022. Great to have you with us, and great to have Phil Gould back in the flesh. You feeling better?
I am, mate, I am. Actually, it was tough the first couple of days, but ripping and raring to go at the moment. I've had 3 negatives 3 days in a row, so I actually feel pretty good about it.
Good stuff. Coming up on the podcast today, after 5 weeks of the Premiership, we can talk about a bit of Origin. There's a bit of news around.
It's too early for Origin.
No, it's never too early for. Look, sometimes it is too early for Origin, but I've decided that
Bracey used to start week 1.
Yeah,
at least you've given me 5 weeks apiece. James Bracey, it's all he wants to talk about is Origin.
Loves Origin. Loves Origin. Loves the Bears. Loves Origin. We're going to. I'm going to channel Tony Barber with Six Tackle Trivia this week.
Okay.
You know, if you could bring back...
Can you whistle?
Tony Barber?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Don't you know that Tony Barber was one of the world's great whistlers? I don't know if it was him whistling in the ad, but...
Oh, what was the ad?
It was an early ad, even before he went on Sale of the Century or whatever.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was a whistler. He was a whistler in an ad.
He's a whistler.
Yeah.
There you go.
I can't remember what it was. Cigarette commercial or something.
I know he was on a copper. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, so I remember. Yeah.
You're too young.
Yeah, the whistler, no, it's coming back to me now. He was on a copper ad too. But I'd love... To Mike Sneesby upstairs, I'm issuing a plea. We've got to bring back Sale of the Century. Or what about The Price is Right? I love The Price is Right.
Beautiful. Be wonderful if we can bring back Graham Kennedy to do it.
Yeah. Was that was
Blankety
Blanks?
Blankety Blanks, yeah.
Yeah, what was it like? What was the premise of Blankety Blanks? How did it work?
Well, they'd say a sentence and they'd leave a word out, and you had to fill in the blank.
Okay.
Yeah, which Graham Kennedy made extremely funny.
He was very good at that.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Now I think, I don't know how
this is all before your time, isn't it? Oh, you're making me feel very old now.
Well, no, Sale of the Century. I love Sale of the Century. They used to have sports. Remember, they used to have sports specials. They have sports people on. I reckon Greg Alexander was on a Sale of the Century.
Yeah.
I reckon Fatty might have been on one too.
Yeah. I had a really good mate. He died some years ago, but he went on Sale of the Century. Very intelligent man, very well read, and he went on Sale of the Century. And we'd always laughed about if you know how they get to choose their prize at the end of the day, and they had 9 boxes to pick the 9 boxes. He said, I just start at number 1 and go right through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, which box will I pick? So we called him the carryover champion because he lasted till about the 3rd or 4th night. Yeah. And he'd say, box 1, box 2, box 3, box 4. He was going to go right through and win it all. And I think after the 3rd night, the host said to him, he said, "You're going really good." He said, "Yeah." He said, "I only know sports and movies. I don't really know much about anything else." Of course, on the 4th night, they never asked the sports or music questions.
He's out.
He done it himself and got out. The carryover champion. Yeah. He went away with a gold pen. That's all he won for his 4 nights.
We've got to bring it back. You could host it. You'd be good at that. Look.
Fatty could host it.
Fatty could host it.
Fatty could host it. He'd be brilliant at it.
You're kidding, mate. You got nothing.
You stupid crocodile.
You imbecile. We've got some great Ask Gus questions as well, an overwhelming response. But we do have to start with a couple of serious issues. Now, I'm in a state of confusion about a couple of things in the game at the moment. Let's start at the top with the news at the judiciary last evening, as we record this on Wednesday morning, that Marcelo Montoya from the Warriors has been suspended for 4 weeks after being found guilty of contrary conduct after he made a, what they're calling a homophobic slur on the field towards a Cowboys player in the match played in round 5. So a 4-week suspension. There's not a lot of upside in us having a long debate about this. There are people on both sides of the fence in relation to this, but the punishment, Gus, 4 weeks. Now, in terms of the judiciary, I've written it down here. The longest suspension so far in 2022 is 6 weeks for Mitch Barnett, where he was referred straight to the judiciary. The second longest was 5 weeks for Tyrell Fuimaono for the tackle which ended the season of Hayes Dunster. And Marcelo Montoya's 4 weeks is third. So this is, in the eyes of the match review panel and the judiciary, the third most serious thing to happen on the field in season 2022.
Yeah, as you say, there isn't a real lot of upside into trying to discuss this subject because you can have accusations from both sides trying to read words into your mouth or to put words, insert between the lines in what it is you're trying to say. I have no problem with a 4-week suspension for a homophobic or racial slur, right? Racial slur on the field at any time. Right, that is something that we just don't have in society these days, and this one's come right out of the blue. I can't ever remember at any time any player ever being accused or charged with a homophobic slur on the field of play. There have been examples over the years, certainly of racial vilification, which have been dealt with under the processes of the NRL. Back in 1997, the ARL made a rule that there would be a $20,000 fine for a racial slur. And I don't decipher between racial or homophobic or other types of slurs, derogatory terms like this. But throughout history, there have been 3 that have been punished that we can find. In Barry Ward, who was fined $10,000 and later reduced to $5,000 on appeal. Brian Fletcher, who was $10,000, stood down by his club for 1 game, but that was not a direction of the judiciary. And Paul Gallen received a $10,000 fine for racial vilification in the early 2000s. Now, I have no problem going forward if the NRL make a rule that any racial or homophobic slur on the field of this nature is going to incur a 4-week suspension. But no player running around on the field to play last weekend would be aware of the fact that such a slur, if picked up and charged, would get a 4-week suspension. In the past, these sort of things have been dealt with by fines. Now, it's fine for the league to say, well, from now on, all right, if you do this, we're not going to put up with it, and we shouldn't, all right. It's going to be a 4-week suspension. But I think it's to come up with this penalty, and I've actually spoken to preeminent Judge Paul Conlon about this, who used to be the judiciary chairman, and he was of the view that dealing with this matter under contrary conduct, that it was rather harsh to issue a 4-week penalty now, given that the players did not know that racial or homophobic slurs on the field will be dealt with in that matter, where in the past and the precedent was always for a $10,000 fine. Now, we can go back and argue it in those days. They should have done more about this back then, all right? Albeit they were all racial vilification and not homophobic vilification. But Montoya should have been treated pretty much the same way as those on this occasion, and saying we're not going to tolerate this anymore. From now on, it's a 6-week, it's a 2-month, it's a life suspension, whatever you want to call it, we are not going to have this in the game. And then you've made your statement. But for some judiciary members and the judiciary chairman at this time to suddenly turn around and say, well, we need to do something about this, therefore we're going to make an example of you and suspend you for the 4 weeks, I think is rather harsh in this context, and in the context with which it was delivered, right, which is unique. So, in no way are you or I or anyone supporting what was said. No way in the world. And I have no problem with this being a suspendable offence in the game to whatever degree the NRL determines. But to do it this weekend on this one-off instance where it happened, without the players or the player group understanding that that was the penalty for that sort of thing, I think is probably a little unfair.
So you're saying, and as an observer of this, and again, what was said was wrong and has no place in the game or society. But
and you've got to keep saying that, because otherwise people are saying you're supporting what was said, which we're not doing that at all. But what I'm saying is it's been dealt with extremely harshly compared to the way these have been dealt with in the past, and players would have had no idea that that was going to be the penalty if they let that slip out of their mouth at any time during the game and they were picked up on it.
Which I might say probably wouldn't have changed it anyway, because it was a heat-of-the-moment comment that wouldn't have had
any
any
consideration. It may well have, it may
would.
well not have, I don't know. But, you know, it wasn't intended in the context that word would normally be used. It was, you know, it was used in that specific sense of that part of the game. But people will take offence to it, and they're right to take offence to it, and it needs to be stamped. It can't be said. It's as simple as that. But the penalty itself,
it seems a bit arbitrary.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, okay, well, where did you pluck the number, and why did you do that, and who are you trying to appease with this? And you know, the players didn't know that was going to be the penalty prior to. So, you know, it would be easy to say, well, let's fine him $20,000, which is the same as what was put in place all those years ago for racial vilification. And I marry the two together. And And from now on, it's not going to be a monetary fine. You know, you'll get life, or you'll get 6 weeks, or you'll get the rest of the season, whatever happens with it, so that it just doesn't happen again, and players get this out of their vocabulary. It's as simple as that. So I think context, and also the fact that the player's unaware of what the penalty was, in that respect, and Judge Paul Conlon certainly made the point that he felt it was unfair to deal with it at this time in that regard, and that this should have been the instance for where we now set the rule in place. It used to be dealt with under a thing called detrimental conduct rather than contrary conduct. During the off-season review, detrimental conduct and contrary conduct, which is a whole range of things, were sort of fused together under the new system. At the end of the day, Montoya deserved penalty, and the game cannot have this in the game. It's as simple as that. We all agree on that. Yes. We all agree on that. But to suddenly pluck 4 weeks without warning, I think, you know, it can be argued that that's unfair to the player. But it certainly sent a message, and we won't see it. Yeah,
there's a new precedent, and it's 4 weeks.
We won't see it again.
Now, I'll tell you what's confusing me even more, and you're a perfect person to talk to about this because you have had in your career at club level regular interactions with the integrity unit, and they work to police the integrity of the game, as the name would suggest. But there is some stark inconsistencies at the moment, and I'm hoping you might be able to unpack them for me. Anthony Milford this week had assault charges dropped and is hoping that he can resume his NRL career on the back of that. The indications from the integrity unit are that despite the charges being withdrawn, that the incident that he was involved in doesn't satisfy them, and there's no guarantee that they would register a contract for Anthony Milford despite the police withdrawing charges. At the same time, Taylor May has been charged by police for assault after in a celebration after last year's grand final. Now, there's like a 6-month gap between the incident and the charges, so make of that what you will. But he has been charged by police, but is permitted to continue to play for Penrith. Payne Haas wasn't charged for any incident with Albert Kelly, and I think is generally accepted wasn't at fault for any of what happened with the Albert Kelly thing. Albert Kelly was being a pest. He told him to go away. He's been suspended and fined. So too has Albert Kelly. The police are the lawmakers, but the integrity unit has its own jurisdiction. This is very confusing and inconsistent. The fans would like this cleared up. Can you do that?
In a word, no. I think you've articulated the frustration pretty well there. And from my experience, though, all these situations are usually very unique. They're all very different. The circumstances and the context of the alleged offences can vary wildly, and certainly very wildly from what is reported, right, through the media, which is where most people get their information and form their opinion, and the way in which it's reported, and sometimes bears no resemblance to the facts. And quite often players a situation where they may have fallen foul of the police, even to the point where they may be charged with something, knowing full well, though, that their chances of acquittal are almost guaranteed, and that this matter is going to be a storm in a teacup before it actually reaches its final resolution. And even in the more serious ones that we've seen recently, eventually there is either a court day where the player is eventually found innocent in a court of law, or he's found guilty and had to deal with it. And we can go back to the Jack de Belin and Jared Hayne instances. Jared wasn't a contracted player at the time, but you know, we sort of talk about those things. I've said publicly, I think we get a little bit sensitive and oversensitive to this, and there is certainly a thirst from the media to report incidents. And you know, even now we will see headlines that a relation of an NRL player was convicted of something. We have to get the NRL player.
Salacious.
Yeah, we have to get the NRL player in the headline for people to read the article, even though it's got nothing to do with him. It could be distant cousin, old mate he hasn't seen for 6 years, and he's done something wrong. But because he's the cousin or related to an NRL player,
mightn't have spoken to him.
NRL players partner, NRL players this, and it's got nothing to do with the NRL player whatsoever. It just happens to have the same name, or he's related to him. So there is a thirst within the media to blow this up when it happens. And I've said quite openly, and I said it on 100% footy, and I will say it again. If the Payne Haas matter had come to me as a club boss, I wouldn't have even reported that to the NRL. It was a nothing incident. But the fact that some person in the public has filmed it and then sent it off to the media and it gets out, now they're guilty of something because they've put the game in. They hadn't. Payne Haas was dealing with a drunken pest. It's as simple as that.
But the question, the confusion is, and look, I am stating the facts without any prejudice here, that we have a player who is currently the subject of police charges allowed to play. Anthony Milford has been acquitted of police charges, yet may not have a contract registered, and Payne Haas wasn't charged with anything and has been suspended.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you can even put this in the Montoya. It's what the league feels is going to satisfy the media and the general public. That's how they come to these determinations. What can we do? What can we say? What suspension can we give that will get the media off this subject and we can move on? As to whether or not it is a just punishment for actually what had happened. All right. Now the NRL won't like me saying that, but that's basically what it is. All right. And we can even go to the Montoya thing with that. It's to satisfy public opinion, social media, and what will make them move on from this so we can move on. It's as simple as that. Now, let me just separate the Anthony Milford thing for the time being, because if you knew the Anthony Milford facts, like I know the facts of this matter, there is only one person through all of that Anthony Milford thing who has been wronged, and that is Anthony Milford himself, on 2 counts. First of all, on the charges of assault and having to go to court and deal with these types of things, and which we've seen now, well, later the charges were dismissed because they were not sustainable, they were not supported by video evidence. I've actually watched the whole video. I've watched exactly what had transpired on the night and how it came to this. But there are 2 things where Anthony Milford has been terribly wronged. Number one is in the charges and having to have this matter played out in public, and that he's been charged with some sort of assault, which just didn't happen. If anyone was assaulted, it was Anthony Milford, and that was proven in court. The judge actually said in her delivery that he'd shown great restraint, even though the police had withdrawn the charges because the credibility of the witnesses was poor and that there was nothing in the video to support what the witnesses had said had happened. Even though all that had been disproven and those charges were actually dropped, right? They weren't even... The judge wanted to look at it to make sure everything was above board, and she agreed with it and said, look, he's shown great restraint and I think he's done well, and et cetera, et cetera. When you see it, it's mind-boggling. But the second thing is it's a situation of his contract status with the South Sydney club. And this bears thorough investigation, and I don't think it's been investigated anywhere near enough. All right? Now, I'm not putting any blame on the NRL for this, but I think South Sydney have got a number of questions to answer about their contracting situation with Anthony Milford, because Anthony Milford's contract has not been registered, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Anthony Milford has had no payment, no money, living with his wife and 2 children in a 1-bedroom in his parents' house in Brisbane since last year, because he's facing these court charges, and South Sydney and the league would not register his contract, when in fact the contract should have been registered when it was signed on the 31st of July last year, on or about the 31st of July last year.
31st of July?
31st of July. It was then sent by the South Sydney club to the league to be registered on the 12th of August. Why there was a delay of 12 days, I don't know, but it could have been because they were in COVID bubbles or because they were up in Queensland or what have you, but that's, that's neither here nor the point. But South Sydney were informed 6 days later on the 18th of August that there was a problem with the signing of the contract. And this is a very common occurrence. The contracts are often sent back from the gateway. You register your contracts with the gateway. That the process wasn't right for the signing because back then there was COVID. We couldn't get everyone in one room. They had to be witnesses by JPs. They had to be lawyers. They had to be managers present. They had to do it all by Zoom. We had to coordinate all that so everyone could give evidence to say, yeah, they put their hand on the Bible and do all that sort of thing, and they've signed it all off. But, it's a big document, and sometimes some pages aren't initialed or some variations aren't initialed. This was a stat about the stat deck, had nothing to do with the meat of the contract. And an email went back to South Sydney to say, look, we can't register the contract. You need to fix up this stat deck.
So the contract was signed properly?
Contract was signed properly.
Right.
There was a problem with the stat deck. South Sydney were informed, the player manager and the player weren't informed that the contract hadn't been registered on the 12th of August, 6 weeks before the incident that later became a police matter and charges were laid, which have since been dropped. Right? So the contract should have been registered prior to the 20th. In early November, Anthony Milford left his family home in Brisbane. They rented it out to a new tenant. He was relocated by the South Sydney Club to Sydney, flown down, his furniture brought down by the removalists, furniture put into storage, put into a new premises, got a car.
Jeez.
On the 10th of... So they've actually acted upon the fact that there's going to be a contract here. And then on the 17th, a week later, a conversation between the manager and the coach says, what's the problem with Milford's contract? He said, I don't know. I've got no idea. And he said, well, I've been told he can't train. He said, why? He said, well, the contract hasn't been registered. So the contract should have been registered in August, 6 weeks before the alleged incident on the 20th, of which he has now been exonerated.
Yeah.
South Sydney acted upon the contract and relocated the player. Now they're saying the league won't register his contract because of the incident on the 20th. So I think there needs to be a fair bit of work on that timeline, and I'm not accusing South Sydney of anything, but I think that needs to be thoroughly investigated, because had the contract been registered at the time, and there's nothing wrong with the contract, had the contract been registered at the time and Anthony Milford charged with this offence, he could well have fallen under the no-fault stand-down policy of the NRL, where he may have been stood down pending trial and pending, the accusations, defending himself in court. But he would have been getting paid, as others have done. Anthony Milford's had no money coming in, and this contract has not been registered, not because of the incident. The contract wasn't registered because there was a fault in the signing of it, of the stat deck, which is a very common practice and needs to be resolved straight away. Why that wasn't resolved at the time, no one knows, nor has anyone been asked to explain it. But now because the contract wasn't registered, even though they acted upon it and relocated him to Sydney, all right, now they're saying, well, no, the league's not going to register it. You're on your own. Back to Brisbane you go. So he's gone back since that time.
Did you say he's living in a one-bedroom apartment?
They're in one bedroom in his parents' house. Yeah. So he's had no money since that time, and he's obviously suffered a lot of stress and mental health issues and different things, and he can't redraw down his loan because he doesn't have a redraw facility on the loan on his house, and it's all very, very difficult. So now it turns around, and those South Sydney obviously, well, they don't want him. They're not going to register a contract for him, and how they get away with that, I don't know. And he's going to sign with another club today, but the league is saying, well, we've looked at the video, even though the judge has looked at it, even though the police have withdrawn the charges, we've looked at it and we're not happy with it. No, I don't get that.
Well, I guess that kind of points to my question. That is a staggering story, by the way, and I'm sure that will be something that will be investigated broadly by the media after.
Well, I've got pages and pages and notes.
However, the notion of duty of care has been in the press for the last few days, Gus. I wonder whether duty of care applies to this situation.
Well, my understanding is, and in all due respect to the NRL, that they have reached out a number of times to Anthony Milford. It was pointed out to them, and they have reached out to him on a number of occasions. But that may be a bigger story down the track. Look, I just think Anthony Milford, from what I can see here, has been wronged on 2 counts. And number one, and plenty of people get falsely accused and falsely charged, and when all the evidence is not initially available to everyone, but that's where it was dealt with. He was ended up fined $1,000 because during the confrontation he had with all these people, and there were a number of people confronting him at the time, He pushes over a wheelie bin, which strikes a car that was parked on the sidewalk there. He did it out of frustration, not towards any other individual, but that's just what happened. He was obviously agitated and frustrated. So he got a $1,000 fine, no conviction recorded, was the end up of it. But the assault charges, which are obviously ones that make the media and everyone draws attention to, and whether, sometimes courts, will exonerate people, but people believe it's happened anyway. I mean, I've seen the video. I've seen what he had to put up with on the night, and it's. I think he's been wronged there. And he's certainly there needs to be an investigation as to why his contract with South Sydney was not registered at the time.
Okay. Well, we'll move on because we've spent a lot of time here talking about very serious things. But I just wonder whether you, as someone who is in charge of the football operations at the Bulldogs, do you have any concerns that the integrity unit, in some respects, overreaches? I mean, the police is the law enforcement body of the land.
Yeah, I've dealt a lot with the people at the NRL Integrity Unit, and I find them great to work with, and they're very understanding. But there comes a point where a decision has to be made on behalf of the game, and the game sometimes is far more sensitive to it than the people that are doing the investigating, and they'll make a different determination, or the penalty will be much harsher. But that whole process has just exacerbated over the years. We never had an integrity unit until the Asada episodes back in 2012. And the integrity unit has now come in and deals with absolutely everything. Everything's got to be reported to the integrity unit. And I've reported a number of things privately to the integrity unit that never ever saw the light of day publicly, and I can trust people there that it doesn't. The matter will be dealt with, and it's dealt with right, and they're happy with it. Or it's not a major issue, but if this becomes in the media, at least you've been informed that it's happened. Mm-hmm. But they're not big offences, and the integrity unit deals with it appropriately. But the minute it hits the papers,
we go into meltdown.
And I know that frustrates people at the integrity unit, right? So it's not perfect. One of the things, and I spoke about this last year, and it's just to see a different way of life. And I'm not saying this is right, but to think that we're dealing with major integrity issues. There is a website in America for NFL players who fall foul of the law, and who might find themselves being charged or arrested for different things. And there is actually a website where you can check up actually who's been arrested or who's in jail this week or who's getting out of jail. And Tom can't play this week; he's just been arrested for so-and-so. But Bill's got out of jail; he might be available this week. So I'm not being flippant about it. But,
thankfully, we're not quite there.
So this website lists, these are the arrests, charges and citations of NFL players for crimes more serious than just common traffic offences. Almost all of the players belong to the NFL roster at the time of these incidents. The data comes from media reports and public records. Listen to this. It cannot be considered fully complete because records of some players' arrests might not have been found for various reasons, including lack of media coverage or accessible public records. So the reason that it's not on the data website, because we didn't know about it because the media hadn't reported it, right? But listen. The database was conceived by someone in the media, actually. But listen to some of the charges, all right? And there are pages and pages. It goes back to the year 2000. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them of arrests. Guns and drugs, battery, involuntary manslaughter, battery, guns and drugs, domestic violence, battery, eluding police, DUI, bomb threat.
Maybe Steve was down. That was in a perilous position, and they evacuated the stadium.
Assault, DUI, failure to appear, domestic violence, eluding police, indecency with child, assault, domestic violence, murder. Yeah. Reckless driving, gun, battery, domestic gun, destroying property, guns and drugs, evading arrest.
Gee, Frank Clark's got a good run there.
There are
6 of them.
Well, there's something like 30 since January last year, right?
So, but
we're talking about a different world and a different way that these things are handled, where everything over here is blown out of all proportion. So I don't see here where 2 players had a scuffle behind a plant. late at night on their own.
Well, I think we're lucky that we don't have
murder, manslaughter.
Too many murderers going around the NRL.
Guns, drugs.
We're not being flippant.
Tom can't play this week because he's in jail, but Bill's out.
We're not being flippant about that, but you are using that to illustrate that there's a disproportion.
What I'm saying is that, we're nowhere near as bad as what else is happening around the world, and we tend to overact to this, and our media obviously overacts to it. I'm concerned for Anthony Milford's welfare. I really am, and the more I look into it, the more I feel he's been wrong. Now, I'm happy to be proven wrong. I'm happy for the league to investigate that and make sure that everything's above board, but it seems rather strange that,
Well, that just it underlines the inconsistencies, and that's a staggering story that you've broken here on Six Tackles with Gus. All right, I'm going to ask you this question. Please keep your answer to 45 seconds.
Yep.
Caddo on AskGus says, at what point do the NRL and the referee start using common sense when it comes to crusher tackles? Because ultimately, it's the ball carrier who has put themselves and the defensive players in this position by backing into the tackle, creating a compromising position for all involved. 99% of them get a penalty and resume as if nothing's happened.
Yeah, no one wants to deal with it. We've been saying this for years. No one wants to deal with that fact, that it's very, very difficult sometimes for the players. We've had referees come to training to referee scrimmage sessions and opposed sessions of training. Accidentally players will put crusher tackles on their teammates at training, or what is perceived to be a crusher tackle, simply by the way they fall and things happen. Not everything is a deliberate crusher tackle, and we've got players playing for it, players seeking penalties from it, staying down until it's a blight on the game. We know it's a blight on the game, but no one will deal with it. 45 seconds is up.
Well done. Okay, let's talk some footy. 8 weeks today from Origin Game 1. Paul Gallen on 100% footy on Monday night. Very different to the days when the Blues were the underdogs. Have a listen to what he said about the Blues compared to the Queenslanders for Game 1.
And I look when I played, Billy Slater, Cam Smith, Jonathan Thurston, Darren Lockyer. And when Darren Lockyer left, they replaced him with Cooper Cronk. Like, just an absolute beautiful spine. And the big moments in big matches come up with the right play. And I think that's the advantage New South Wales have at this point in time with Luai, Cleary, Cook and Tedesco. I know that the Queensland have got Ponga there. Munster is a great player. Cherry Evans. There's still a little bit of conjecture at who's going to be the hooker. So I think that's a bit of an issue for them. But I just look at that New South Wales spine. I think you throw on top of that Turbo, the Trell, Isaiah Yeo, Murray, Paulo, Payne Haas. I just see that the New South Wales team being superior at this point in time.
Gus, the tables have turned.
What's that?
Gals just sitting there talking everything up. Blues are going to... We went through 12 years. They could hardly land a blow. Now they're talking about how superior they are. But my question is Paul Gallen being a bit disrespectful? Because the Queensland spine for Game 1 of the Origin series could be, injury notwithstanding, Kalen Ponga, Cameron Munster, Daly Cherry Evans and Harry Grant. Now, Cameron Munster's probably the best 5'8" in the world. On form, you'd say Harry Grant's the best hooker in the world. Kalen Ponga, we know, carrying injury, struggling a bit this year. And Daly Cherry Evans is the incumbent Australian halfback.
I'm not writing Queensland off. I never write Queensland off. Ever.
That's all?
I'm not writing them off.
No. I guess Gal's getting a bit ahead of himself here, isn't he?
Well, go and talk to Gal, mate. I can't control Gal.
Okay. All right. Who would you pick at left centre for New South Wales then? Latrell, it's a tendon, which are much harder to manage than a muscle, so you would think that he's probably going to miss that first game. It's 8 weeks away. He's got an 8-week injury.
Yeah. I don't pick teams 8 weeks out from them. I don't know if you know the rules yet. I've tried to explain this to Bracey. I don't like talking Origin, and I don't like picking teams 8 weeks before the event.
Okay, let's just say the games next week.
That's hypothetical. There are any number of contenders. I saw Katoni Staggs play a brilliant game the other night.
Yeah.
I think that, he's a contender for that position. There are any number of players that could fill into that left centre position. Stephen Crichton from the Panthers has been one of the form centres, form outside backs of the competition right throughout the last 2 or 3 seasons. So there's any number of players that can fill in.
Matt Burton?
Matt Burton could fill there at left centre. Right? He's playing 5'8" with his club at the moment. And he's got to learn 5'8" all over again because he hasn't played 5'8" for the last 3 years at Panthers. He was playing left centre. But he could certainly fill in. He was Dally M centre of the year last year. So there are any number of players that could fill that position.
You think Staggs is that robust sort of Origin-suited player?
I think they're all great options. I don't think there's a bad option there. Sooner or later, Brad Fittler and his selectors have got to sit down and make a choice. But I'm not worried at all about any position in the New South Wales side, and I'm not worried about even injuries. We've got a great amount of depth. But I'm certainly not writing off Queensland because it's Origin football, and we've seen, like 2 years ago it was the unlosable series, but we managed to lose it. Right? That's just how it happens in Origin. And the more you write them off, the more Queensland are exactly where they want to be. They've got a new coaching staff, Billy Slater, Cameron Smith, Jonathan Thurston. You don't think that they won't have a trick or two up their sleeve? But can we talk Origin at the Origin time, please?
You're not really that interested in Origin, are you?
I am when Origin comes around.
Up. Maybe this will get you fired up for the Origin, Gus.
But that's the beauty of sport. This result is not yet carved in stone. The New South Wales Blues will have their say. When the Blues players are handed their jersey tonight, they're not just given something to wear. They are also given a slice of history. They're given an opportunity to create their own history. They're given an invitation to be extraordinary. To beat Queensland tonight, they will need inspiration. And the best place to get that inspiration is from each other, out here, on the field in battle. Inspire each other with your effort. Inspire each other with your courage. Inspire each other with your will to win. So there it is for New South Wales tonight. Their destiny is not so much in their own hands, but their destiny could well be decided by what's in their own hearts. Enjoy your Origin football.
Give me a jumper. I'm ready. Game 3, 2013. They got beat. But that was great.
Yeah.
See, 8 weeks. We're nearly there.
Yeah.
Doesn't that get you fired up?
No.
The last word. Yes. He's not that interested. Okay. I'll tell you what. We're going to do 6 tackle trivia after the little break because I've got a different one. So we'll be back with plenty more after this. Welcome to Sale of the Century Round 6, 2022. I'm not Tony Barber, but I do have for 6 tackle trivia a Who Am I? So this is a step-by-step question.
Yep.
Okay. So when you get it, I need you to hit that.
Yep. What's that?
It's a buzzer.
I'll make my own sound.
Who am I? I was born in Sydney in 1985.
Makes you 37.
I attended Maris Brothers at Cogra and played my first football for the Brighton Seagulls.
Mm-hmm.
I made my NRL debut in 2003 and scored the first try of my career in just my second game, although I didn't score too many tries. I played for 2 NRL clubs, both Sydney-based. I went on to represent New South Wales and Australia, but I'm pretty sure only once each.
Wow.
After 210 NRL games, I headed for the English Super League where I played with the Leeds Rhinos. I usually wore jersey number 10. I share the same hair colour as Molly Ringwald, Ed Sheeran and Rita Hayworth.
A redhead.
And you gave me my nickname.
Oh, not Keithy.
Keith Galloway!
Big Keith Galloway. Yes, Big Keith Galloway. One of the champion players of the game. I never got any commission for that.
Big Keithy.
Big Keithy.
Why'd you love him so much?
I just loved him. Big redhead. Big Keithy. It started actually. I called it. I think I might have called one of his first grade games. I was actually working for 2GB, calling the football at the time, and I fell in love with him. I just loved his toughness, and and he wasn't blessed with great natural ability. He wasn't blessed with great skill. He was all physical and used his body, and
It was all heart.
yeah, all heart and great. He's turned out a great family man and a great ambassador for the game, and he was a great servant to the game as well. So
Big Keithy,
Big
we
Keithy.
salute you.
I love Big Keithy.
Gus, Daniel Friend asks, when coaching, did you treat everyone the same, or did you give some players a cuddle and some a kick up the backside?
Absolutely. They all need a different. The biggest thing to coaching, is one of the things I say, you need to give them what they need to hear, not what you want to say. Plenty of times you want to give them a kick up the backside, but they need a cuddle. Or plenty of times they need a cuddle, but you need to give them a kick up the backside. They want a cuddle, but you need to kick them up the backside. There's no rule to that. And I've actually spoken to Wayne Bennett about this, and he says that's the art of coaching. He said is is to be able to treat them all as individuals and to know exactly what that player needs at that particular point in time. And, you know, sometimes they need some tough love and sometimes they need to be told the facts of life. And at other times they need to be kidded to. And it's, you know, knowing the difference is where experience comes in and where relationships are built and hopefully where you can help players achieve the things that they want to do in their career. You can help mould their careers. So it's, I'm not saying it's and I think all coaches understand what I'm talking about and all people would understand that. But no, you don't treat them all the same. There are standards and there are things that you set within your club and disciplines and roles and all that. But in your personal one-on-one interaction with the player, in how you deal with his personal life, his family life, other things that are distracting outside of football, in the way he's playing football, preparing for football, how he deals with setbacks, how he deals with injuries, how he deals with mistakes, how he deals with confidence and insecurity and lack of confidence. And you would be very, very surprised how many players make it to this elite level. And any player who plays NRL football is an elite participant in this sport. I mean, you talk about all the kids that first pull on a boot at 6 years of age. How many actually play NRL football and play for any length of time? But you would be staggered to know how many of them have insecurity. Look at that. Look at that, the Masters golf on the weekend, the leader, Scotty Scheffler, who admitted to breaking down and crying on the morning of the last round because he didn't believe he was up to this. Had emotionally got himself to the point where I don't even know if I can go and play.
Amazing.
And his first 2 holes, he hit it left and he was lucky to get up and then
What about the recovery?
He chipped in on the 3rd hole and he was off and running, and all of a sudden all that disappeared. And it's an amazing story, and people don't realise it. People would never realise how many kids we've got in counselling or how many kids we've got being treated for different things, the horrific backgrounds they have in their life, the insecurities and the lack of confidence that they have. So you need to learn to be able to treat them differently, and you make some mistakes along the way too, you know, and sometimes... you can get bluffed by players, and players can be very cunning, and others can be quite open and accommodating. But that's a part of what a coach has to be. It's not just about the football. In fact, the football is, I think, sometimes a small part of it.
Yeah.
It's the rest of it in helping people do. A large number of our players fail for all the wrong reasons or go through their whole career with insecurity, with anxiety.
Some of them are the meal ticket for the family, aren't they?
I've known some of the greatest players in the game to have huge anxiety issues. I won't say it. It's up to them to divulge that sort of thing, but had huge anxiety issues, particularly when they were younger.
Performance anxiety, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anxiety about all sorts of things, you know, lack of confidence, lack of self-belief, lack of understanding. I had one player who had to win a Dally M award before he believed himself that he was a good player. It's just extraordinary sometimes, and I think sometimes that's why it helps to have played the game and been an average player. I think sometimes the greatest players of all time have struggled as coaches because they don't quite understand the anxiety and the lack of confidence that the vast majority of players deal with, and then the securities that they have. And it's something that you need to understand. That's a long answer, isn't it?
No, it's a great answer.
We treat them all differently.
No, it's a great answer.
We've got to treat them all differently.
And it's a great insight for people because I was going to follow that up and say, gee, Michael Maguire would have to be a good man to give his players a cuddle after the weekend. But
Michael Maguire is wearing himself to the bone. Michael Maguire is wearing himself to the bone trying to solve everything that is wrong with his football team and his club under the scrutiny, the most intensive scrutiny, which just seems to bounce from club to club, whatever the media decide is the flavour of the week that week. But, you know, West Tigers are doing what West Tigers are doing, and it's going to be like that for a while until such times as the players start to pull themselves out of it and the club can pull themselves out of it. And they're not the only club in that position. There are plenty of clubs in the cellar at the moment. They've got a lot of work in front of them if they're going to get it right.
Yep. Love that question, Daniel. Thanks. Love this question from Adrian Burke, who asks you, which player was the unsung hero for each of the 3 club teams that you coached and why?
Oh, wow. Wow. Who did I coach? Coached the Bulldogs. We won a premiership in 1988. for me, the unsung hero in that team, and there were many great players in that team. I mean, you're talking, Peter Tunks's and Folkes's and Langmack's and David Gillespie's and, Paul Dunn's and, I don't want to name them all, Steve Mortimer's and Michael Hagan's and Terry Lamb's and, we had all these Andrew Farrers and Tony Curry's and all those sort of great players. But we made a positional shift early in the season and played a young bloke called Jason Elchin at fullback.
Oh.
And Jason Elchin, I'd coached the previous year in reserve grade as a halfback.
Yeah.
He'd never played fullback in his life. And he came in and played fullback. And if you go back and watch a lot of the tapes, a lot of the times he played fullback and dummy half. It was rather extraordinary in that era. But he was one of our unsung heroes. He gave us a sharpness out of dummy half and a resilience. And he's physically... what he provided for that team. In a team full of stars, he was regularly recognised by the rest of the team for the efforts that he made and the sacrifices he made during the course of games and how tough he was. So, unsung hero, probably Jason Elchin.
A terrific player, Jason Elchin.
Yeah.
Great one. What about the other two? Panthers and the Roosters.
Panthers, we won a comp at Panthers.
Cole Vandervoort?
That's the obvious one, Cole Vandervoort. Cole Vandervoort was an extraordinary player, and he missed the 1990 grand final. He did all the ligaments in his knee. ACL did the whole lot. Halfway through 1990, we played the back end of 1990 without him, and I'm sure had he played, we probably beat them. Only got beaten 18-14. As great as the Canberra side was, we played them 2 years in a row. Should have beat them both years. We did beat them 1 year. And the following year he played and we won. But everyone in our team recognised that Cole Vandervoort was that sort of glue that pulled everything together. When everything else was gasping for air, it was Cole Vandervoort that was hitting the ball up or making the tackles. And it was funny because he looked so ordinary at training. He used to limp and get around. He couldn't keep up. But you get there on game day and he was the only one going when everyone else was tired. There was another unsung hero in that year, and you remember that team as well. You had Royce Simmonses and Paul Dunn's and Mark Gyers and John Cartwrights and Greg Alexanders and Brad Izzards and all these great Brad Fittlers and all these great... They were young at the time. But people don't remember that the player of the year that year for the Panthers was Steve Carter.
Oh,
very young, 5'8".
Wow.
And easily voted the player of the year that year. He was extraordinary. And he was another unsung hero of that game. Went on to be a very long-serving Panther player through some difficult times and through the Super League War. And but I remember him at that time being a star in a team of stars, being a young player who was a star within a team of stars. And that's, I say that sometimes it's very, very crucial where a player gets his introduction to NRL football and who he's playing with. The people that he's playing with on the field, he learns more from that than he will from his coaches. It's the environment that you put him in. And some players just find the wrong club at the wrong time and it can ruin their career before it starts. But
he might still have played most games at Penrith.
I think he holds the record, yeah.
And what about the Roosters?
The Roosters. We too had some great players. When I first went to the Roosters, they'd run last in first and reserve grade the year before. And we sort of had to build the team from scratch. And we were able to make some purchases and all that in the middle of the Super League War. We had some great players. There were some players that I absolutely loved in that team. And we had some great players too. But Luke Ricketson was always a favourite of mine. And I can't imagine ever picking a team without having Luke Ricketson in the team. Brian Fletcher was a very favourite player of mine, even though he was a pain in the neck. Excuse me. We bought a young fella from St George called Andrew Walker, who ended up being a scintillating member of our team and an incredible talent. Played for Australia, played for the Wallabies in rugby union. He was a dual international. One of my favourite ever footballers. And we had another player called Tony Iro.
Yeah.
And Tony Iro was one of my favourite players, and he was a crucial part of the team in 1995 when we'd sort of run last the previous year. My first experience with Tony Iro was I had actually signed to coach the Roosters in 1994. I left the Panthers when I'd made the decision that I was going to sign the Roosters, go to the Roosters, and I'd gone to the Roosters training for the last 6 weeks. And in the last game of the season, the second last game of the season, they got beat 44-4 by Parramatta. And the caretaker coach, Arthur Beetson, walked in and said, I quit. He wasn't going to coach the last game after he got sick of him, because I was just getting belted every week. So Nick Politis turned around to me and he said, baby, you're coaching them next week. I said, what? He said, you've got to coach them for the last round. I said, oh, okay. So, and it's a playoff for the Wooden Spoon. We're playing Gold Coast or someone, I think, at the football stadium. And as luck would have it, the last game I coached with Panthers had been against Gold Coast. Anyway, I'll come to training on the first night. Got them all into training on the Monday night because I'm taking over on the new coach. And I've gone to the under-20s coach. The under-20s were going pretty good in the competition. I said, give me your 3 best kids. You just pick 3 of your best kids. I said, I'm going to play them in first grade this week. And I think it was Adam Starr, Robbie Mears, hooker, and I think young halfback. What was his name? He's coaching now. I'm just trying to think if he's not going to see him. Anyway, so then I went around to the senior players. I said, look,
Not Holbrook.
No. James Shepherd.
Oh, yes. He's a Penrith.
Yeah, James Shepherd. So anyway, and I sort of dropped a couple of the senior players and because I've been watching them for a few weeks. And I went to Tony Iro, and I sat down with Tony Iro. And Tony Iro had sort of been a winger at Manly, and he had his brother who was a great player, and he'd come across to the Roosters and he'd bobble around. I said, Tony, what's your best position? He said, I don't know. I said, well, where do you like playing? He said, I don't know. I said, where do you want to play? I don't know. I said, I actually think you're a pretty decent player. And he said, I don't know. I said, well, where do you want me to pick you in the team? He said, I don't know. I said, do you care? He said, yeah. He said, I don't know. It's been terrible. He said, I don't know. He said, I don't know. He said, I'm going terrible. I said, all right. I said, well,
this is an inspiring conversation.
I said, I'll pick you in the team. I'll pick you in the team, and we'll go from there. So, right. So, of course, Tuesday the team list comes out, and I picked him at fullback. So he's come running into training Tuesday night. He said, fullback? I said, yeah. And he said, why fullback? I said, well, you can't tell me where you want to play. I said, so play fullback. So I've never played fullback in my life. I said, well, I don't care, just play fullback. He said, why fullback? I said, well, stand back there, have a look at all the other positions. When you like one, yell out, and I'll move you.
That's your best ever.
He said, you're effing mad. I said, you haven't seen anything yet, baby. So he goes out to play fullback. And he's still shaking his head when he goes out onto the field. Well, of course, they put a couple of kicks through. It's rolled through his legs. He's not got on. He dropped the ball. And after 15 minutes, he yells out, second row. I said, lovely. So I swapped him over. And he played in the second. Anyway, you wouldn't believe it. We won that game. But the following year, and for while ever he played with us, he was one of our mainstays of our team. The harmony in the team, the entertainment of the team, and the football on the field that he played was extraordinary. We turned him into a wide-running second rower, probably one of the first at the time, and he was a great ball player, and he's over there doing great work with the Warriors in the Warriors Academy. We went over there and set up the Warriors Academy last year, halfway through COVID. He's done a lot of active work there in player development. And he's
second row.
Second row! I said, right, swap him over.
That's too good.
Anyway, we beat him.
You won?
Yeah, we won.
94, I'm trying to think who was...
When the game was over, I said, go over and cheer the crowd on the other side of the field. They looked at me and said, there's 2 blokes there. I said, go over and cheer them. I said, there'll be 20,000 here next year.
Didn't take long to turn that around. Nice work. I've got a heap more questions here. Let's do the preview and I'll ask a couple at the end. Thursday night footy to start round 6 down in Canberra. Ooh, Ricky might need a lunch. Ricky might be getting close to a long lunch. If he doesn't win this week, he might have a week-long lunch.
He'll be winning this week.
They're up against North Queensland. Now, he's brought young Xavier Savage onto the bench in 14. There's a bit of doubt surrounding Matt Tomoko in the centres. We might see Jared Croker for the first time this year.
Yep. See this sheet here? These are my team ratings so far after the first 5 games. This is on all our stats and everything that we're doing. Very interesting.
It is.
About who's at the top. And it sort of registers where we are on the premiership ladder a little bit at the moment, don't they? You know, the number 1 team in the comp has been the Sharks.
That's amazing.
Statistically, even better than the Panthers, even though the Panthers are undefeated. Rabbitohs at 3, Roosters at 4, Eels and Cowboys, not much between them.
No. So this is their personal best of the year? Or
this is their average performance over the 5 rounds. Remember, South got beaten badly and had a terrible performance in round 1, but their performances in the 4 rounds, statistically, Sharks have been extraordinary. Raiders, you can see down here in third last position, just in front of the Bulldogs and Tigers.
So on the ratings, you've got to tip the Cowboys.
Well, yeah, by a clear margin. You know, the Cowboys are going much better than the Raiders at the moment. You counter that off with desperation from the Raiders and the fact that they're playing at home, and then you think, well, you know, Ricky, can you get them up? Statistically, I'll tell you what, we'll go by the statistics today just to see whether or not the statistics ring true. How about that?
Why don't we? No, well, you do your tips, right, and then we'll write a separate one for what the stats say.
All right. Well, look. Normally, I would tip the Raiders. If I look at this, I would have to tip the Cowboys.
Right.
Right. So this is why we get things wrong, because we tip with our hearts and not our heads.
So you are tipping the Raiders.
I would normally tip the Raiders. Yes.
Right.
Statistically,
can't.
You can't. You would have to tip the Cowboys in front of them. Raiders would have to improve immeasurably to beat them.
Our mates at Bluebet, you look out. We got the ratings here.
Well, that's why you don't agree with bookmaker markets, because they do all this analysis. Punters don't. They punt on favourite colour, favourite name, favourite jockey, favourite barrier, favourite.
None of them are working for me at the moment,
Colour
Gussie.
horse.
Good Friday, 4 o'clock, Accor Stadium. Rabbitohs versus Bulldogs. We know Latrell's gone for 8 weeks. Young Blake Taft got a good crack last week and played well at fullback. And I think you made a change on the bench for the Dogs. I was going to give the Dogs half a chance here, but I'm looking at the ratings. The ratings say they can't. But you are going to tip the Dogs. And I thought, I wonder whether you agree, there was a real spirit about their performance last week against the Panthers. Clearly, Class won the day, but they're playing for each other.
Yeah, that's a given. Trying hard and not giving up. They're good qualities, but it's a given. That's what you should be doing when you're an NRL player. So that's the bare minimum. Obviously, they've got to sort their football out, both in attack and defence. And, ratings-wise, you can see they're a long way behind the Rabbitohs. Their 2 best performances this year, the Bulldogs rate better than the South Sydney average, which is probably where you give them an opportunity. But South Sydney will obviously be hard to beat, despite the fact they're saying no Latrell. Well, they went through last season without Latrell and made it to the grand final. So it's not as though they haven't learned to do it. Blake Taft's a very good young player, and Cody Walker is the ingredient there. But
Halfback's going good. Ilias.
He is, yeah. And because he's been playing with three really great playmakers, he's just allowed to do his job. We've talked about that before, but that should be a great Good Friday game. I'm looking forward to that. I'm actually calling that game for Channel 9. So
you're calling the Doggies?
Looking forward to that.
Yeah,
yes.
Right. Well, I'm heading out to Penrith. Good Friday evening. Panthers versus Broncos. Panthers in the box seat to make it 20 straight at home.
Yeah, I don't think they'll have too much trouble either.
No pain.
Panthers been winning very, very easily.
Yep, I should be winning that comfortably. Now, Saturday's good. Saturday, there's some really good matchups. At Brookie, 4 Pines Park, Manly, who were just dominant against Newcastle in terrible conditions last Thursday. They've had a long turnaround to recover from that. And they've got the Titans, who concede leads and come storming home. If they can get the start to the game right, Gus, they look like they can compete with anyone.
Yeah, their consistency over the 80 minutes is the issue, and their consistency, particularly without the ball, is the issue. If I look at the ratings here, they're pretty much side by side in the middle of the pack, so it's a pivotal game for both sides, even though Manly are coming on 3 wins in a row. I favour Manly's ability to score points and to defend them, probably a little better than I favour the Titans' ability to defend points. So very slightly to Manly, but not surprised by an upset.
Okay. Very good. How about this one? Storm versus Sharks. The old foes. Down in Melbourne, and we see Nico Hines and Dale Finucane playing against their old club for the first time. Aiden Tolman's come back. He missed with COVID last week, and they get Tyron Wishart back too. He's on the bench with young Alan McDonald dropping out for Melbourne. This will be great. This will be really, really good.
Yeah, it's the game that the Sharks need. It's the game where they can actually prove themselves now. So they go away from home, the toughest place to play in Melbourne, where the Storm have got an outstanding record and they're in good form and they're playing good footy. Surprisingly, when we look at it statistically, they've actually won 2 games this year with the lowest points, the lowest statistical points that you could possibly have to have a win. Some of their wins have done just because they know how to win, not so much that they played good enough to win. They just did. And of course, they had that narrow loss to the Eels as well.
Yeah.
If you look statistically, look at the stark difference between the average performances between the two sides.
Points.
There's actually a bigger difference between the Sharks and the Storms. The Sharks are more dominant over the Storm at the moment than the Rabbitohs are over the Bulldogs.
How about that?
Which is extraordinary, isn't it? And the Storm are, raging hot favourites for the match. So statistically, you've got to give the Sharks a great opportunity if they both play if they both play to what they've averaged so far this year. Now, the Storm are capable of superior figures to these, and last year were consistently above what the Sharks are producing now.
Yep.
So too were the Panthers. But the Sharks at the moment, statistically, the best side on the field. So they get a really good opportunity. They're going there in real good form to play a team that's been good, but not at its absolute bristling best, and have been a little bit inconsistent. And if the Sharks do their thing, they are in with a real chance. I tipped Parramatta to beat Melbourne in Melbourne the other day, and the Sharks are going better than what Parramatta were at the time.
You said Parra was certainties.
I did. And I'm not saying that the Sharks are certainties. I'm saying that the Sharks are in this with a real chance. A real chance. Now, if Melbourne turn on one of those Melbourne days, well, no one beats them in Melbourne. They beat everyone in Melbourne. That's just how they are. But Sharks fans should be very excited about A, the football that their team is playing, and B, their prospects this week down there in Melbourne against the Storm.
So that means you're tipping them?
I'm going to tip Shark.
Oh, good. Blue bet. I think they're about $3. There you go. Love these ratings. How do I get my hands on these every week? Roosters versus Warriors here. Sydney Cricket Ground. Same team for the Roosters and the Warriors. Well, they lost Marcelo Montoya, of course, with that ban. So Dallin's come back, though. He's been out for a bit. Yes, SCG. Oh, Sam Verrills is in, sorry. My apologies. Sam Verrills is in.
Yep.
First game of the year. So they've got a specialist number 9 there. That's going to make a huge difference to them, isn't it?
Yeah, Roosters at their best, very good. And there are a couple of games where they were nowhere near that. They've had wild fluctuations in their performances, but we would probably expect a good performance in this one, playing at home. And the Warriors, as I said at the start of the season, this is a real top 8 contender. They've now had 3 wins, albeit narrowly with a couple of them. There was another one they should have won and didn't. So I'm still thinking that. What are you taking your photo?
Photo your ratings.
He's a tragic punter, isn't he?
No, I don't. No, just to show my mates.
Yeah. So anyway, and there's only 5 rounds here. I mean, that's not a great sample of work, but it gives you some sort of indication of where they're coming. So I would expect the Roosters to beat the Warriors, but the Warriors are doing everything that I said they would do at the start of the season, and they're a genuine top 8 contender.
Is that the race caller?
Yes, I'm getting a phone call there from Alan Thomas.
Thomas, the race caller?
He wants me to do an interview with him later in the year. He does a special interview with people throughout Australia around racing and that sort of thing. So
great.
Yeah.
He called State of Origin football,
He did, yes. He called a little bit of football when we were struggling for commentators. I don't know what happened at the time. Everyone was sick or something was going on. Or we couldn't travel. There was no flights or something or other. I remember he called a game. And the kick-off, he said, they're off.
Did he?
They kicked off at Suncorp State. He said, they're off.
Was the red light on? Oh, that's gold. Great call. I loved his race calls. He was quirky, wasn't he? But good.
Yeah.
Roosters?
Yes.
Yes. Now, it's possible neither team will win this one. Dragons versus Knights. I say that nicely because we're covering that on Easter Sunday. It's down in Wollongong. Now, the Dragons have got a find, haven't they? They were dreadful last week. Josh Maguire is on the bench. Terrell Fuimaono, after a long suspension, is on the extended bench. Now, David Clemmer has been named to make an early return from his knee injury. They are really rattled up, though, with problems. Edric Lee's back. Hasn't played a game since 2020. He replaces Dominic Young, who's injured. And they have named Adam Clune, but my understanding is that he's engraved out. They've got problems there in the halves. Kalen Pong is not 100% fit, so look, they're the walking wounded, Newcastle.
Yeah, Dragons are specials in this one. That's my special of the week.
Oh.
Dragons will not lose this weekend. They will not lose.
Okay. And we whip home Easter Monday. Parra versus the West Tigers. He's made a stack of changes, Madge. Well, He's kind of shuffled them all around.
Yep.
Not much else to really say, except Parra will probably win.
Absolutely.
All right.
So I'm going with Raider, Bulldog, Panther, Sea Eagle, Shark, Rooster, Dragon, Eel. My special of the weekend is Dragon to win on Sunday over the night.
Excellent. 2 quick questions to finish. It's been a good podcast today. We've covered some ground. How should the NRL thank the Warriors for keeping the NRL alive by being in Australia during the whole pandemic?
Said this, as soon as the Warriors can return home, every club in Australia should take their home game against the Warriors to a New Zealand regional area and play so that they can play every game of the season in New Zealand, not at Mount Smart, but all over the place.
Great idea.
They could go up to Whangarei, they could go to Christchurch, they could go to Hamilton, they go all those places around, and every Australian team should take their home game against the Warriors over there, because we haven't had to travel to New Zealand for 3 years and they've been living in a suitcase and hotel rooms. I think that's just a really easy one to justify.
Excellent idea too. It'd be great to promote the game in those regional areas. Last question. This one's from Steve. I know you like cooking a barbecue. What's your go-to on the grill? Do you have a Bulldog /Panthers/Souths /Newtown apron?
No.
What's your go-to on the grill?
Steaks and sausages.
That's
Very,
it.
very simple.
Fair enough. Oh, I thought there was something a bit more exotic. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today. Thank you. Always good fun. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, mate.
That's
Bye-bye.
6 Tackles with Gus. Thanks to our mates at Bluebet. Make sure you enjoy the footy over the weekend. Happy Easter as well. We'll talk to you next week.